request from one page to another page. Page navigations we are going to create in the Angular. For that we are going to implement the routing, we are going to deal with the two things here: router link, outlet. Router link will specify which path is binded to which component, which URL should be binded to which component. URL to component mapping we are going to do in the routing. So to work with routing in the Angular, at the time of creating the Angular project, we need to enable the path, which that will be available in order to implement page routings. In the morning session, we have implemented a application with the home page, services page, about us page, contact us page. Here, when user land on the page, all the menus will be displayed. In the app component, we have the logic to display the menu, and to display the subcomponent data, we have a router outlet. When you click on the home, URL will change, but page will not reload. URL will change, content will upload, but page will not reload. That is called single page application. That is called single page application. Got it. Now, next topic, the very important topic that we need to discuss in the Angular is how to develop forms in the Angular. How to develop forms in the Angular and how to deal with form validations in the Angular. Right. If you go for any web application, developing the forms is very common requirement. Developing forms is very common requirement in every web application. Forms are used to capture the data from the end user. So if you go for any application, login form will be available, registration form will be available, search form will be available, like this. Multiple types of forms will be available in every application. So in the Angular is a front-end framework. So when we are developing the front end of the application by using Angular, we need to develop the forms also in our application. Okay. Now, how many ways we can develop the forms in the Angular? Here guys, there are two ways to develop forms in the Angular. One is template driven approach and the second one is reactive approach. Could you please tell me how many ways we can develop the forms in the Angular? How many ways we can develop the forms in the Angular? How many ways we can develop the forms in the Angular? In two ways we can develop the forms in the Angular. What are the two ways to develop the forms? First one is reactive, second one is template driven. So if you go for any web application without forms, the application will not be available. Login form will be available, registration form will be available, search form will be available, contact us form will be available. Multiple forms will be available in every application. Developing the forms is very common requirement. Angular also supporting for forms development. How many ways we are going to develop the forms in the Angular? Let's go to angular.io website. Let's see that. Angular.io. Go to the documentation part. Developer guides. Now, here forms concept is available. Introduction. Handling user input with the forms is the cornerstone of many common applications. Applications use forms to enable users to log in, to update a profile, or enter sensitive information, and to perform many other data entry tasks. For every application, forms are going to play very important role. Angular provides two different approaches to handling user input through forms. So Angular supporting two types of forms development. One is reactive, another one is template driven. Angular official documentation is saying that handling the forms is very important task in every web application. Using the forms, users can log into application, user can register into application, user can update the profile, and they can perform several other important tasks also through forms. Angular providing two different approaches to develop the forms. One is reactive, second one is template driven. Both capture user input events from the view, validate the user input, create a form model, data model to update, and provide a way to track the changes. In the both ways you can develop the forms. Alright. Now here it is going to give you which approach you need to go for to develop the forms. When to go for reactive forms and when to go for template driven forms. Already in our example last time we have developed one registration application. There we have already developed a form. The registration application we have developed, let me run the registration application once and let me show you how we have developed a form in the previous session. Right, cd space registration ng serve --open. We have already developed a form there. In that approach we have used, in that registration functionality we have developed a form by using template driven approach. We have used template driven approach to develop. Now you see here we have already developed a form. Username, password, confirm password, gender, country, accept license agreement. We already developed a form here and we are able to submit that form. That is template driven approach. Template driven. How we will develop the template driven approach form? In the template driven approach form we are going to use directive. ng model directive will be available. We are using ng model directive in order to develop that form. Now see here, ng model directives we are using. Username is equal to, username is a text field. Username field is binded to one variable available in the component class. You see, username available, form fields binding to variables. Right? In the component class we are declaring one variable. That variable we are binding to one element in the HTML. Like this we are going to develop template driven forms. Rely on the directives in the template to create and manipulate the underlying object model. They are useful for adding a simple form to an application such as an email list sign up form. They are straightforward to add an application but they don't scale as well as reactive forms. If you have a very basic form requirements and logic that can be managed solely in the template driven forms would be a good fit. So here two ways, right? Template driven and reactive. If you want to develop a simple form by using directives concept, what is the meaning of directives concept? Your form data will be binded to a variable. Your form data will be binded to one variable. Then you can go for template driven forms directly. Now see here, I have a template driven form. In the component class, I will declare a variable. That variable I will bind to a property by using ng model. So here there are two input fields are available. Those three input fields are available. Three input fields are binded to three properties in the component. Property nothing but variable. And here a submit button will be available in the template. When you click on the submit button, then I want to call one function in the component to handle the form submission. So like this, if you want to develop very simple forms in the application, then you can go for template driven forms. Simple forms without any complexity, then you can go for template driven forms. How we will develop the template driven forms? Template driven forms we are developing by using directive. What is the directive? ng model directive. What is the purpose of ng model directive? To achieve two-way data binding. ng model directive is used to achieve two-way data binding. Form field will be binded to component class variable. That is what we have done already. Here I have app.component.ts. Username is one field, password is one field, confirm password is one field, gender, country, license agreement. Like this I have taken some variables. All these variables I have binded to form fields. Username, password, confirm password, gender, country, license agreement by using ng model. So if you use ng model directive to develop the forms, then that form is called as template driven form. Now go for, let us see what is reactive. Provide a explicit access to underlying form object model. Form data will be represented in the form of one object. Compared to template driven forms, these are more robust, they are more scalable, reusable, testable. Okay, if forms are key part of your application or you are already using the reactive pattern for building your application, then use reactive. When you want to develop a complex applications with high scalability, reusability, testability, then better to go for reactive forms. If your application dealing with so many forms and forms are very important in your application, then you need to go for reactive forms. Otherwise you need to go for template driven. So for simple forms, go for template driven approach. For complex forms, go for reactive approach. Got it? Now let us see some of the differences between the template driven forms and reactive forms. Could you please read the differences? Could you please read the differences between template driven forms and reactive forms? Can you see the difference between template driven versus reactive forms? If you want to develop simple forms in our application, then go for template driven. Template driven forms are created by directives, NG model directive. Template driven form validations also will be done by using directives. Template driven forms validations also will be done by using directives. If the forms are complex, then go for reactive forms. If the forms are simple, then go for template driven forms. Understood? Yeah. Now let's develop one template driven form and one reactive form. Already we have developed a template driven. Now we will do one more form with the validation concept, guys. NG new template form. NG new template form. I'm going to create one application. NG new template form, no routing, CSS. I'm creating one project. Guys, here I have given the steps clearly to develop that forms. Choosing an approach, when to go for reactive form and when to go for template driven form. Template driven forms are suitable for development of simple forms with a limited number of fields and simple validations. Less number of fields and less validation conditions are there, then go for template driven. In these forms, each field is represented as a property in the component class. Property will be binded to the field using NG model. As we are using ng model, we have to import forms module. We have to import forms module. So the steps here: create a project, create the project, ng new app name. I'm creating a project, ng new app name. So the project is getting created. Yes, the project created. Let's go to cd space template form. Template form is created. In this project, src is there, style.css, some global css available. For the global css, I want to add some styles. ng touched, ng invalid touched, ng valid touched, error. So to display some errors, highlight the fields with a green color, red color. I am doing some styles in the styles.css. This styles.css is a global CSS which is applicable for all the templates available in the project. Alright, now as we are going to use ng model directive, we need to import the forms module in the app module. Go to app module, app-module.tss. By default, browser module is available. There I am importing forms module. Without forms module, we cannot use ng model. Without using ng model, we cannot develop template driven forms. Right. Project created, CSS added, global CSS, and forms module imported in the app module. Then next one, you can write the logic in the component class. Directly I am writing one function in the component class to represent form data. app.component.ts. So in this class, I am writing one function which is used to handle form submission. Form submit function, form colon any. If submit function I am writing, it is going to represent the form data and it is going to print that form data on the console.log of first name, console.log of last name, console.log of comment. Like this I am writing this component. Now go to HTML. Guys, first I'm going to keep some presentation logic in the HTML. I will come to that presentation logic also. First let us see, are we able to run this project or not. ng serve --open. Form presentation logic, text fields I want to display, so those are text fields I am writing here. The text fields I want to display, so those text fields I am writing here in the form. Alright, next one, just I want to display these text fields. Okay, now can you see first name, last name, comment? Like this the fields are displaying. Like this the fields are displaying now. First name, let's come again, let's run this. Now my form is displaying. Okay, so open browser console, function F12, open DevTools, console, then clear the console, nothing is there. Enter the data, Raju bhai, comment, hello. Click on submit. Can you see, are we able to submit the form data? Raju bhai, hello. What happened when you submit this form data? When you click on a button, this is submit button, then we have binded this submit button to a function. Button class is equal to button primary type is equal to submit, class disabled, then submit. Right? For this form I have given submit. ng submit is equal to submit contact form dot value. So here I have created a form by using ng form directive. Then ng submit. When this form is submitted, I want to call this submit function. What is there in the submit function? Form dot first name, form dot last name, form.comment. I'm just capturing the form data. Then I am printing the form data back on the console. That's why we are able to see this data on the console. Let's enter some other data. Ashok, IT, welcome. Click on submit. Now you see Ashok, IT, welcome. That form data is coming here. That form data is coming here. So are we able to submit the form? Are we able to submit the form? Yes, we are able to submit the form. But what is the code available in the HTML file? That code we have to understand. Whatever the code is available in the HTML page, that code we have to understand. Okay, now let us see here. Let's try to decode this code line by line. Let's try to decode this code line by line. The first thing is, in order to develop a form, we are using form tag. The first thing is, in order to develop a form, we are using form tag. In order to develop the form, we are using form tag. All right. Now let us see here. Up to this. In order to develop the form, we are using form tag. Form contact form is equal to ng form. For this form, I am giving one name. Contact form is equal to ng form. I am giving some name for the form. All right. Then for this form, I am binding one event. Ng submit is equal to submit of contact form dot value. That means whenever you click on the submit button, ng submit will be called. Ng submit is going to call the submit function of the component. For this submit function, it is passing complete form data as a value. See here, ng form, it is binded to contact form dot value. That means this complete form data will be submitted to that submit method in the form of key value. What would be the key? First name, then value that you entered, the key that is last name, the value that you entered, the key is a comment, the value that you entered. Okay, so here we have written ng submit. This is used to call the function when the form is submitted. Then next one, for every field we are creating a div. So total there are 3 fields are available. So total 3 divs are created. For every div we are keeping one class as a form group. Let's leave it. Now next one. So submit we understood. When the button is clicked, this form will be submitted. Then next, how we are writing a text field, how we are binding the text field to the variables. Input, required min length, max length, these are validations of the form field. It is a mandatory field, that's why I am giving required. Minimum 3 characters are required for this field, maximum 10 characters you can enter for the field. So if you see that the first name input field having 3 validations. First validation is required, second validation is minimum length, third validation is the maximum length. Required, min length, max length. Then ng model, name is equal to first name, type is equal to text, first name is equal to ng model. We are binding this field to first name variable. Are you clear with this one? We are binding this form to we are binding this field to first name variable. Same thing. Second text field available. For this there is only one validation, required validation available. This is binded to last name variable. Third field available, which is also having a required validation. This is binded to comment variable. And we have one button. Button type is equal to submit. Class is disabled. If the form validations are not satisfied, then disable the button. So there is some condition available. If a form is not valid, if the contact form is not valid, then disable this button. You cannot submit that button. Like this, I am writing some validations. Now look at this highlighted points. Here ng submit available. ng submit, that is the event binding. When the button is clicked, then ng submit event will be executed. What I am telling to that event, call the submit method, submit function, passing a contact form dot value. Here contact form is available. So form data will be passed to submit. In the component, we have a submit function. It is taking form data. Form dot key, form dot key, form dot key. It is going to capture form data. 3 fields are available. Every field is binded to one variable. First name, last name, comment. You understood how I am binding these fields to that? This is a label just to display that field label. This is just a label. Label. Label is available, field is available. Label is available, field is available. Alright. See this. Label is for which variable that we are writing. Label for means the label is for which variable. For which element we are writing the label that we are representing. Label we are writing for which element we are representing. Label for is equal to first name. So the label name is first name. That label is for first name field. Okay, form is fine. But what about validation? Form is fine, but what about validations? Okay, now in order to do the validations, guys, for the form, we are using HTML attributes. In order to use the validations, we are using HTML attributes. Required, that means it is a mandatory. Minimum length, maximum length, we are going to use the validations. How we are going to validate the form data? If you see the image, for the form validations also we are going to use the directives. Form validations also we are going to do by using directives concept in the template driven approach. Now you see, I have taken several directives to do form validations, guys. There are several directives available for form validations. Now first let me do validation for last name so that easily you can understand. Last name validation is there. Last name, for the last name I want to take one validation. Input, here there is a condition called required. Required means that is mandatory. Required means that is mandatory. Suppose if user don't enter that, how can we verify? If user don't enter this, how can we verify? Div class is equal to error. ng if the last name variable is attached, that means if you click on that variable and if it is invalid, that means if the required, the user don't enter the data, then I want to display this error message. Last name is required. Now click on the last name and come out. You see last name is required is coming. Last name is required is coming. For comment, for first name, message is not coming. They are becoming red, but message is not coming. So only for last name the message is coming. Why the message is coming for the last name? Here I am doing that validation. I am printing that validation message here. I am printing that validation message here. Already for the last name I have given required attribute. Required attribute means that is a mandatory attribute. If that required attribute, required validation is not satisfied, if the field is touched and if it is not valid field, then I will display last name is required message. Same thing, there is a comment field available. There is a comment field available. For the comment field also, I have given required attribute. That means this is also mandatory. This is also mandatory. Then how can we write validation for the comment field? Same thing. Same thing. Div class is equal to error. I want to display that error message. Div class is equal to error message. Ng if comment field is touched but comment field is not valid. That means this required validation not satisfied. Required validation not satisfied. Click on comment, come out. I did not enter the value. If I don't enter the value, it is coming comment is required. For last name also, I have not entered the value. That message is coming. Let's enter some value. Let's enter some value, come out. It is becoming a green. That means that field is valid field. That field is valid field. In the comment field, I have not entered anything. Comment is invalid field. That field becoming red and the message is coming as comment required. Now let's enter some comment. If I come out, then that also becoming green. Here, comment field validation satisfied. Last name field validation also satisfied. Then what about first name? For first name, I have not given any validation. For the first name, I have not given any validation. Now, how many validations I am giving for the first name? 3 validations. Required, minimum length, maximum length. In order to give the 3 validations for the first name, we are going to write 3 things here. We are going to write the 3 things here. What are the 3 things? First one is to check it is required field. First name is valid or not. If it is not valid, is it failed required validation? Is it failed min length validation? Is it failed max length validation? Based on that, I want to display the error message. Now see here, first name is required. Let's enter 2 characters. What it is displaying? First name is minimum 3 characters. Last name I have not entered. Then first name I have removed. If I don't enter anything in the first name field, it is giving the error message as first name is required. If I enter 2 characters, it is giving first name is minimum 3 character. Now, if I give something like after 10, it is not accepting because max length I have given 10 only. Min length is 3, max length is 10. After 10, it is not accepting. So, for the first name field, I am taking 3 validations. Required validation, min length validation and a max length validation. Required validation, min length validation, max length validation. Now I am writing a div ng if directive checking first name is valid or not valid. If the first name is not valid, 3 things are there. It can fail here, it can fail here, it can fail here. Is it failing because of required? If the first name error is required error, if it is required error, then print first name is required message. If the first name field contain min length error, then print this minimum length. If first name contains max length error, then print max length error. But the remaining 2 fields, I have only 1 validation, required validation. If the field is not valid, then display last name is required. For comment field, I have only 1 validation required. If the field is not valid, then comment is required validation I have to print it. So 3 fields are having validations. First name, last name, comment. Okay. So like this we are developing template driven form with validations. So to develop the template driven form, we are using directives, ng model. Even to validate the form also, we are using ng if directive. Ng if directive is used to validate the form. Form development and form validation, everything we are doing by using ng if directive. So look at the form fields, look at the form validation. If you look at the validation for one field, then you can understand for the remaining fields also. See the validation for this comment field. See the validation for the comment field. Able to understand? For the first name, 3 validations are available. So for that I am taking these 3 validations. So for every field we are using ng model directives. For every field we are using ng model directive. And for every validation we are writing errors checking. For every field we are doing ng model. So now, as discussed in this diagram, template driven forms are creating by directives, and the validations also can be done by using directives. Same thing, if you go for reactive forms, reactive forms are called as model driven forms. Reactive forms are called as model driven forms. Reactive forms are new types of forms in the Angular which are suitable for creating large forms with many fields and complex validations. If your form contains multiple fields with several form validation conditions, then it's better to go for reactive forms. If your form is very simple like login form, registration form, limited validations, then you can go for template driven forms. When your form contains several fields with several conditions of validations, then better to go for reactive forms. Reactive forms are called as model driven forms. Reactive forms are called as what? They are called as model driven forms. Now, in template driven form, every field is represented by using directive. Here, in this, every field is represented as a form control, and a group of controls is represented as a form group. One form group will be created. In the form group, several form control will be available. Every field is represented as one form control. To develop the template driven forms, we imported forms module. To develop the reactive forms, we need to include reactive forms module. This is also available in the forms package. If user does not touch also, you can write it .touched, .untouched. If user doesn't touch that field also, you can do the validation. Someone is asking, if a user submit the form without touching the field, then what should happen? You can write it touched and untouched. Touched or untouched, I can do that validation. There is untouched property also available. Touched property available, untouched property also available. Now, develop a form using reactive forms with below fields. Now see, the development style will be different when you go for template driven forms and reactive forms, guys. In the reactive forms, every field will be considered as a form control. Not the directives. Every field will be considered as a form control, not as a directive. And several form controls will be called as one form group. Now when we are representing this form, class form control name is equal to name. Here form control I am representing for the name, form control I am representing for the email, form control I am representing for the body. So one form I am creating with 3 controls. Name, email, body. When we are representing a field, you need to tell that field belongs to which form control. That field belongs to name control. Here also, fname.touched, fname.invalid, then display the validation message. Similarly, email field belongs to email form control. Then body field belongs to body form control. And the button I have given with a submit button. If the button is clicked, then ng submit event. The only difference is, guys, in the template driven form, every field is represented by using one directive, but in the reactive forms, every field is represented by using one form control. Every field is represented by using one form control. Several form controls is called as one form group. Here form group will be created, their directives will be created. That is the difference between template driven approach and the reactive approach. Now observe this. Form group. Understand the difference between template form development and reactive form development? In the template, we are going to represent as a directive. In the reactive, we will create as a form group. In the template driven forms, we are going to create directive. In the reactive forms, we are going to represent that as a form control. Every field will be represented as a form control. Several form controls will be represented as a form group. That is the difference. Here, ng model directive will not be available. In the template driven, ng model directive will be available. In the reactive, ng model directive will not be available because we are creating form controls and form groups here. In the template driven, ng directive will be available for the form. Now, let us create one reactive form and see that. Let us create one reactive form. ng new reactive form. I'm creating one project with the name called ng new reactive form. No routing, no CSS. So here we need to import reactive forms module, guys. Here we need to import reactive forms module. So reactive form application created. Go to app module.ts. Along with the browser module, we need to import reactive forms module. You see, I have imported reactive forms module. cd space reactive form. Here I have imported reactive forms module. Now app.component.html, remove everything. app.component.ts file is available. Now here I want to represent this form group. I want to represent this form group. So in order to represent the form group, I have created one. Import this form controls. Validators I am importing. Right. Form group I have created. Inside the form group, I have taken 3 form controls. One form group I have taken. In that form group, I have taken 3 controls: name, email, body. Name control, new form control I have taken. Then we are writing one function, get function, return this dot form dot controls. It is going to return the form controls. When the form is submitted, I just want to print the form data on the console. Submit function I am writing. Submit function console.log of this dot form dot value, whatever the form data is coming, I just want to print the form data back to the console. Now come to HTML part. Come to HTML part. Here also we are having some logic to display the form. Let us take this logic to display the form. This form is available with validations, guys. Form input field is available, form group available. ng submit is equal to submit. Input form control is name, id is name, type is text, class is form control. This is a validation message. Then similarly, label email, form control name is email. This is a text field, belongs to email field. Then email validation. This is a body text area. This is belongs to body form control. You see, already form controls are defined. Name control, email control, body control. So when I am writing the fields here, those fields are representing as a form control names. Now here I have created one button. One button I have created. Button is equal to primary button. Disabled is equal to invalid. If the form is invalid, then submit button will be disabled. Then submit button will be disabled. Okay. Now for this form you can insert, you can install Bootstrap also. You can install Bootstrap also for this form. I have given the commands to install the Bootstrap. Execute below commands in the terminal to install the Bootstrap so that the validations will affect. Okay, before the validations and before the Bootstrap, let's run this once. ng serve -open. Let us see how this will work. Here also CSS files we can add. Global CSS files we have to add to reflect our validations. Yeah, name, email, body. Guys, can you see submit button is enabled or submit button is disabled? Submit button is in the enable mode or submit button is in the disable mode? Submit button is in the disable mode. Enter the name, enter the email ID, then enter the body. When I enter the body, then only button is enabled. Button is enabled. Let me show you browser console. Let me show you browser console. Currently nothing available. Click on submit button, then form data is submitted. You see, body is high, email is given value, name is given value. Suppose if I don't enter the name, then submit button is disabled. Name is required, email is required, then body is required. The validation messages are coming. Validation messages are coming. Button is disabled. So that validation we are maintaining. That validation we are maintaining in our HTML only. That validation we are maintaining in the HTML only. If you want to modify this, if you want to add some CSS also, I have given the script to execute CSS here. npm install bootstrap. Execute the bootstrap. Install the bootstrap in the project. So this is the command which is used to install the bootstrap in our project. npm install bootstrap. Then npm install jQuery, save it. npm install jQuery, save it. Installing the jQuery. Install some popper.js. Once these things are installed, we need to add these things in our angular.json. Add the below styles in the angular.json file. We discussed about that. In the Angular, welcome file will be configured, styles will be configured, scripts will be configured. I am removing these styles and scripts. I am configuring bootstrap things. There. When you configure the bootstrap things there, let's try to run the project again. Then bootstrap styles will be applied for our project. Now you see the form is available with the bootstrap, button is disabled. Now if you don't enter the data, name is required. If you don't enter email ID, email is required. If you don't enter the body, body is required. So like this, some bootstrap effects are coming for that form. You can customize the bootstrap. The classes will be available. Bootstrap classes will be available to customize our validations. Name, enter valid email ID. If I give some text, it is not accepting. Please enter valid email address. Valid email address means that should have @ symbol. Then only it will considered as a valid. If I give like this, now please enter a valid email address. It is expecting proper emails. Okay, then click on submit. Then form data will be submitted. Form data will be submitted. These CSS bootstrap are project specific, guys, because we are installing inside the project, right? We are executing this bootstrap and jQuery popper specific to our project, and we are configuring these scripts also in our angular.json file. These styles and scripts we are configuring in the angular.json. That means these will be applicable for only one project. Styles I am configuring, scripts I am configuring. I am first installing the bootstrap, I am installing the jQuery, then I am configuring the styles and scripts for the project. These are our project specific. These are our project specific. Good. So here also we have done the validation. Same thing for the validation. ng if directive. If name is touched and if the name is invalid, then if it is because of required validation, name is required. If it is because of min length validation, then name should be 3 characters. Name should be 3 characters. That is the validation we are printing. Same thing for email also. For emails we are giving input